Hello, BookTube. I'm back. As you can see, someone is exhausted. we once again had numerous bookish adventures today, and the fault, the bad start, totally redeemed. I had a wonderful bookish day. We went all over, and it was delightful. And I want to show you what I got. It's a stack of books. I got an actual stack of books today. The first one we've seen on this channel before. I rated it very highly. I absolutely love it. But I'm glad that I got it in a mass market paperback. It is actually the kind of thing that sort of fits a mass market paperback. This is Joe Nesbo. This is Macbeth. This is his entry in the Hogarth Shakespeare series, where people take, you know, the basic template of a Shakespeare play and adapt it somehow or other. And he does it in his normal, he takes Macbeth, the play Macbeth, and just moves it to his normal hard-bitten noir police procedural. And I thought it worked wonderfully. I got the advanced copy of this. I think I showed it to you. I got the finished copy. I think I showed it to you. I got the trade paperback. I think I showed it to you. But I like, this is a mass market type book, if that makes any sense at all. So I was very happy to find it this way, especially since I believe that this is going to be a familiar story, that the advanced copy went out to one of you, the finished copy went out to one of you, and the paperback went out to one of you. So now I have this, and it's not going anywhere. Then this next one is a mass market paperback. It's a big, fat Oxford World Classics. I love it. I do not need it. You have already seen it in my library tour. I have a Barnes & Noble hardcover with all of these same illustrations, but I saw it in perfect condition, like as good as the day it was made. And I figured, I just got it anyway. This is John Sutherland's introduction essay edition of Vanity Fair in the big fat Oxford World Classic. And I'm due for a reread of Vanity Fair. In fact, Vanity Fair is featured on high on the list of books that a lot of you have asked to do a read along of in 2020. So whether that happens or not, I wanted this copy. Then this next one is something that I went book shopping today with Mark at Richardson Reads. Of course, I don't have a car, so we went out and about with the bean on my lap the whole time. And at one of the bookstores, he had better luck finding stuff for me than I had finding stuff for myself. I don't know what I was thinking. I was looking, I thought, industriously, but he pointed this out to me. This is Life with Jeeves, and this is a Penguin trade paperback of just 3 novels. And my first thought was, no, you have that. And then I think I said that. I think I said, yeah, I do have that. And then when Frida and I got to that section of the shelf and I pulled it down, I thought, I might not have that. So whether or not I do, it's a gamble. I'm not at my library, but all of these things were so cheap that I just grabbed them. And the same thing with this next one, the same store. This is the first installment in the Map and Lucia books by E.F. Benson, Queen Lucia. And I have had this series. These are they very much go hand in hand with Woodhouse. These are delightful comic novels. If you don't know this series, you really need to find it and become acquainted. And I am familiar with these from, there's a big, I'm sure a lot of you know, there's a big fat omnibus of all of these called Make Way for Lucia. And I have that, and I have lovingly read that, and I have reinforced copies of it. I've sent copies out to you and to your version of you before there was a BookTube, but I've never actually had all the individual books. And I don't think I've ever read this first book just as a book, as opposed to in part of a Bible-sized omnibus. I'm wondering if it'll make a difference, but I haven't read these in so long that I would have grabbed it anyway. I might have grabbed the omnibus if I'd seen it there. Then this next one was another one that Mark spotted. This is Henry David Thoreau. This is the Concord and Merrimack River. He did a really, really good travel log essay type thing about traveling on the Concord and Merrimack Rivers. And this is an edition, we have seen this already with his Cape Cod. This is in the same series. This is an edition illustrated by Henry Bugby Kane, who's an illustrator that I just love. And you can't get far away from cod if you're in, but I must have looked right at this and not seen it. So I was grateful that Mark pointed it out to me, because this is I mean, when you're on vacation and you just got a checky poo in the mail and you've got it burning a hole in your pocket and you're going to a whole bunch of shops that you never go to, when all of those things are true, I don't care so much about the usual rule that I repeat on this channel all the time, which is that I hope to get books that are permanent keepers, stuff that are going in my little book room. I don't so much care about that when I'm indulging myself. But this and a few of the books that I got today are going into the little book room. That's an extra thrill. Then this next one is definitely, this is a 1-volume collection of Angels in America, which came up on this channel recently because Jason at Old Blues Chapter and Verse was talking about books and movie adaptations and said that he not only cries at the Nichols adaptation of Angels in America, but bawls. And Jason and I don't agree on much, but I have experienced the exact same thing. I know exactly what he's talking about. And I have always had the individual books in this, the 2 individual books in this, or I've had them in a box set, but not in the 1 volume. And again, all these things were so cheap that I grabbed it, because I know that I don't have Angels in America at all. The day is coming. I predict the day is not that far off when this will show up in a Library of America volume, and then I'll just get that. But the mention of it on Jason's channel and then on mine made me want to reread it, and I don't have it. I didn't have it, so now I do. Then a nice Norton paperback of a classic that I think I have as a Penguin classic, but you know, it's attractive and it never hurts. And this also has come up on a couple of BookTube channels recently. This is E.M. Forster's novel Morris, which it's a gay love story, and he wrote it and then sort of embargoed it. He buried it. He knew that he couldn't publish it in his own lifetime, or at least he thought so. I have often thought that was as much overblown operatic theatrics as so much of the rest of his life was. I don't think what would have happened. I mean, honestly, what would have happened? Do we honestly think? Does he honestly think that he would have been hauled off to jail and made to do hard labor like Oscar Wilde? But one way or another, whether he was right or not, I think the Penguin Classic of this, and this is a version that I've seen on Book Depository and been tempted. And then I saw it for 50 cents or whatever. And then at one point we went to just an ordinary retail bookstore here in Vermont that I love. Or maybe it's over the border in New Hampshire. One way or another, every time I'm here, we go there. It's called Books A Million. And every time I'm impressed by it. I really like it. I think I praised it in my last video. And this time I was a little bit distracted while I was in there because Frida wasn't with me. But I did see a book. I saw a trade paperback from Basic Books of James Traub's biography of John Quincy Adams, with a lovely cover portrait by an artist whose name has come up on this channel many times. There was a 2-year period where there were like 4 John Quincy Adams biographies, and this is one of them. And I remember really liking it. Basic Books never sent me a trade paperback. I'd never seen a trade paperback before today. And this was a remainder in the store. I didn't just buy this off the shelf. This was like $6. So I grabbed it and had the very pleasant surprise when I got back here of discovering that I am blurbed in this book, which, since Basic Books never sent me the trade paperback, I never knew that. And next one, and another one was another find that Mark did. Where he's finding books for me. This is an author that I've mentioned on this channel many times. This is Edwin Way Teale. This is his book, A Naturalist Buys an Old Farm, which is illustrated, if I remember correctly. Yeah. This has black and white spot illustrations, and this is exactly what the title says. It's just our author buying and refurbishing and coming to know the natural rhythms of an old farm, and it's a delightful book. I've never had it in this. This is Nature, Edwin Way Teale Nature Classics. I've never had it in this edition, and I haven't had it in a long time, so it's due for a reread. And then this next one was not only spotted by Mark, but it was bought by him. And it's a book that we've seen on this channel. I have hauled it a couple of times, and then one of you always raises a hand, and I send it off. And this is The Power Game by Hedrick Smith, who did a massively best-selling book called The Russians. Back at a time, he wrote The Russians, which was a sympathetic portrait of an enemy people. The reason the book sold so well is because the United States recognized the Soviet Union as its foremost geopolitical enemy, not only because the Soviet Union was opposed to it in diplomacy and economics and thermonuclear power, but also because the Soviet Union routinely killed its allies, murdered them, cut their throats. And so it was just the reason why Hedrick Smith's Russian book was such a popular seller is because it subverted that just a bit. It said to Americans, yes, okay, well, the Soviet Union is your enemy, but the Russian people aren't your enemy. And so here's a glimpse into what they're like. Never in a million years, when Hedrick Smith was writing that book or this book, this is a gigantic book about the workings of political power behind the scenes in Washington. Never in a million years, when he was writing those two books back to back, would it ever have crossed his mind or anyone else's mind anywhere in the country that the inner workings of Washington and the enemy operations of the Soviet state would become the same thing in 2019. No one in 1980 would have believed that anyone could live long enough for that to happen. And yet, yesterday, on his news channel, or whatever you want to call it, his commentary channel that's broadcast to millions of credulous Americans, Tucker Carlson said that he's rooting for the Russians. And he's not rooting for them in a football game. He's rooting for them to slaughter our allies, the Ukrainians. And once again, as I always say when it comes to this administration and its bootlicking toadies, I always want to say, please let me believe this is rock bottom at last. Please let me believe this. So the president's first press secretary takes the podium, and the very first thing he says is more people attended the president's inauguration than any public event in history. An instantly disprovable, visually disprovable lie. Fast forward 2 years. The president's trusted advisor, Kellyanne Conway, is asked a question by a reporter on the south lawn of the White House and responds immediately by saying, "What's your ethnicity?" Again, I thought, this has got to be rock bottom. and then yesterday, a beloved alt-right Klan news guy, commentator or whatever, says he's rooting for the Russians against our allies. The Russians who would string him up in a gulag in 2 seconds. So that's a little rant, just so you know that rants aren't confined to Hyde Cottage. But I needed this. I actually didn't need this book just to spark a rant. I don't have it. I got it and gave it away right away. The last time I hauled it, the request came right away. I actually wanted this book to get the old scent back because I'm writing about mid-century American politics. The major figures, the major movements, all the mind frames and whatnot. And believe it or not, here at the little farmhouse, there are 80 million books, but there are lacunae, there are blind spots, some occasional blind spots, and that's one of them. So I was kind of hoping that I would find either this or a Nixon biography, and I did see a Nixon biography today, but it was worshipful, and that's too high a price to pay. Or maybe Robert Caro's Master of the Senate, something like that. This will do just fine. So I was glad that it was spotted. And then the last one is, I think, a book that I bought a copy of the last time I was here. It's become like a Vermont tradition that I buy this book here and then ship it out to one of you. And it also is a political classic. This is Richard Bryn Kramer's What It Takes, about the path to the White House 35 years ago. Ross Perot, George W. Bush, Bob Dole, just an incredible gallery of figures that Kramer writes so wonderfully. This is such an incredibly readable book that I saw it, and I don't actually have an active need for it, but I don't think I have a copy. I think every copy that I get, I give away, so I might not have it. And it's always, every time I get it in Vermont or anywhere else, I always can't resist the temptation to go to some chunk or other and reread it, because the chunks are the huge chunk, probably 30 or 40 pages about Bob Dole during World War II, unbelievably gripping. The long segments, they aren't all connected, but what a little book that they could make on Ross Perot. Oh my God, what a great portrait of an absolute wingnut megalomaniac. And probably my favorite part, I know that everybody says this about this book, those of you who haven't read it, if you're political junkies, you have to read it. Probably my favorite part is the withering portrait of George W. Bush. The withering portrait. Now, this came out in the heat of a whole little flap in American politics that none of you are going to remember unless you're political junkies from half a century ago. A thing called the wimp factor. George W. Bush faced a thing called the wimp factor. Is he a wimp? And this came out around then, and Kramer does the amazing job of creating a portrait of George W. Bush that is both affectionate and damning, and that damns him as this absolutely vitiated, aristocratic noodle. It's very, very good stuff. The portrait of Barbara Bush. So I was glad to get it again, even though who knows, it's weird to get it, put it in a bag, haul it on camera, talk to you about it, and know perfectly well that the next time I'm here, I will probably buy it again. That is a weird feeling. But I guess people do that on vacation. So there you go. There's too many for me to do a Steve pile. But this was a terrific day. So much made up for the crappy slim pickings of that goodwill. And a Steve blurb. On top of it all, there's a Steve blurb. So there you go. That's your, I will, I don't know. Will I list the books? I probably won't. Well, we'll see. So I just wanted to let you know, in case some of you were worried that my book shopping was just cursed and going poorly, that maybe the rooster had cursed things. That's not true. The book shopping today was fantastic. So I'm going to wrap this up, but I'm going to do one more video, and then I'll let you go. Thank you, BookTube.